offensive tackle and linebacker were two positions of concern for us here on the show. We talked about them addressing the first spot with tackle with Jermaine Ifedi, and now we get to them addressing the other spot, the linebacker spot, specifically more the middle linebacker spot with Christian Kirksey, most recently with the Houston Texans, was a captain for them. I think this is a really interesting signing, Eric, given his skill set, how he could fit in next to Matt Milano, and more importantly, how his skill set is juxtaposed against the rest of the linebackers that are competing for that starting job.
Right. And the Bills were interested in Kirksey a few years ago. We did a film study on him. He's a guy that, the Bills were likely targeting when Milano was up with his contract at the, obviously more of an outside linebacker position. So there was some homework done on him, not just by us, but by the team and even some of the players. We're actually the ones that broke the story of him even visiting back then too.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of he's played with some players on the Bills defense. And so, there was an understanding there and some prior history with some of those players and in this scheme too, because I'm pretty sure he also played in Cleveland under Holcomb when he was there. So there's some understanding and prior history between these guys, but I was worried, when I started watching the film. So I watched his film before I looked at his stats. I want to see where his play speed was at, right? Mm-hmm. And you're seeing a lot of these plays that I looked at, and I'm like, wow, okay. You see some flashes, but you also see that, okay, he's not quite the athlete that he once was. And to be honest, he's playing a different role. He was playing more of a middle linebacker last year, which is one of the first things that popped out on film, right, Ant? Like, so he, from all accounts, from guys that I've spoken to, he is what he puts on. He's a leader. He's a communicator on the field, off the field. You see him setting the defense. I mean, really, when you talk about priorities for the Mike linebacker position in the Bills defense, I feel like that's the first thing that always pops up. And so he obviously has that DNA. And he makes some plays. Is he going to cut some corners sometimes and try to shave an angle and go under a block instead of working over the top? Yeah. And he's going to make some tackle for losses doing that, but he's also going to get caught in the wash sometimes. But I was pleasantly surprised with how much production he put on film last year with the Texans. And so I was not surprised when I was told that the Bills were looking into him. I assumed they were going to, and it kind of confirmed that and validated that. And then the film, it was a no-brainer once you started watching it, right, Ant?
Yeah, and we saw it in a couple of these clips. The first thing that stuck out for me, and it's something again we talked about once Tremaine Edmunds left, was the type of coverages that the Bills used to run, and a lot of the responsibilities that fell onto Tremaine Edmunds. They were able to run those coverages because of his physical ability, like whether he was that middle third player in a Tampa 2 look, or even in a quarters look carrying the number 2 or carrying the 3. He was able to do that because of his size, his athleticism, and Kirksey is not that level of athlete, but he's enough of a fluid athlete that he can function in some of those coverages. And that's the first thing that stuck out to me, especially coming from Houston last year with that Lovie Smith defense. Lovie Smith is one of the major proponents of Tampa 2. So there's so many clips of Kirksey just running that middle third and carrying a tight end. Go ahead.
And you make a great point about the coverages, because who came over from the Texans this year to help the Bills in the secondary and with the coverages, and it's Joe Dana. So again, he has an understanding about maybe the limitations and what he can and can't do on the field, and so he's going to obviously help a little bit too when we talk about that prior history.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a nice way to help him assimilate, and another coach in the room who knows the type of player that Kirksey is. You can kind of speak to that and help him, translate better into this defense. And it's just seeing the athleticism that he has there and watching him being able to carry the number 2 or carry the 3, function as that middle third in a Tampa 2 or in a quarters look, and watching him being able to move fluidly. It's nice, especially compared to, I didn't have any faith that Dodson could do it. I didn't have any faith that AJ Klein could do it. I was somewhat hopeful for Bernard. Like this play right here is not even just the interception is ridiculous. Like the way he finishes this off and rips it from Cortland Sutton, but there he is dropping into that middle third with that vertical drop. He's carrying Cortland Sutton, who is a big, strong, fast receiver. You see him right in stride with him. Granted, he knows he's got, some safety spots over the top, but he's right there. Looks back once he sees Sutton go up for the ball, makes a play, and it's tough to see on this angle, but he
Yeah.
gets his hand up in there, as you can see, rips the ball out, and then as Sutton is falling to the ground, the ball is loose. Kirksey grabs it, rolls over, pounces on it, and logs it as an interception. Like, the awareness and the athleticism to make that play at the catch point is tremendous. But I throw that up to more of like, well, the ball bounced in a specific way. Granted, he made a play on it. I was just more excited, like, look at him carrying a legitimate receiver vertically. Like,
Yeah. And you know what's funny, Ant, is because if you go back to the Bears game, there was one play. I can't remember exactly, but I know JT Sullivan broke it down because he was telling the fans and viewers that, hey, Fields should have threw this bender route over the middle, just like that route to Sutton, because Dotson was smoked. He didn't recognize it as quickly as Kirksey did, and he wasn't able to carry it. The guy had, like, I don't know, 5-6 yards separation on the linebacker Dotson, where it's a similar play, but Kirksey recognized it so much quicker, and he got on his horse, and then again making a play on the ball. That's just a whole nother dimension that we just haven't seen from Dotson.
Absolutely. Like, being able to make a play on the ball is something you're not getting from Dodson, let alone like the athleticism and the speed to carry these guys vertically. And, speaking of the type of athlete that he is smooth. I do think he is athletic, but he is more smooth and fluid than he is twitchy. This isn't some dude that's some short, bursty, close down type of dude, like in the blink of an eye, but he's fluid. He's got the agility. You've even seen a little bit on that play against the fullback. Like, when he's avoiding blocks, he's dipping that shoulder. He's slipping blocks. He's not going to be, let me take on a blocker, stack and shed. He's going to use his agility. He's going to use his fluidity to attack shoulders, defeat blocks at the second level and at the first level with that agility. I like that you mentioned earlier, about him like kind of taking some shortcuts. He'll shoot gaps versus the run, like under and over, and sometimes it kind of puts him out of position, but it just speaks to that, that aggressive nature that he has. I like him as a blitzer. You had a bunch of the clips showing him come forward. There's some shooting the gap right here.
He's really good at this, like, especially when we're talking gap runs.
Oh yeah, that was my next point. Yeah, especially against
when you get this guy going here and they're kind of blocking down, trying to wash guys down, or slanting guys so that he can be aggressive. Like, he's very good at slicing through, dissecting that, and then tripping up running backs and bringing guys back down in the backfield for tackles for losses, especially in those gap type runs where they're allowing him to process it quickly and then undercut those blockers and down blocks. He just makes so many plays on that. But he will get covered up at times when we're talking wide zone runs, outside zone runs, and the offensive lineman is able to scoop cleanly to him and get a piece of him. They do cover him up, but again, these gap runs, look at him come downhill on this versus that gap run, and he just finds just enough, space to avoid a block and to slice through there and to make tackles in the backfield. So he's very opportunistic, and more times than not, he makes the correct decision and process. But there are times he does get caught up. But this is the other angle we're not even really talking about, his ability to diagnose blocking schemes and add on as a rusher, whether he's stunting and looping or just adding on as a rusher as that running back stays in. He somehow ends up on the doorstep of quarterbacks a lot. He had 17 pressures from the middle linebacker position last year, which is a really nice dimension and something we talked about, not with Dotson, but with Terrell Bernard. So again, I think this is why he is such a great scheme fit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny seeing there's some misdirection pieces you'll see like in the run game that, what some RPO looks or different like counter actions and things where he'll kind of like, you can see him trying to process it and almost it allow him to get eaten up at times at the second level or like misdiagnose. But in pass protection, it's a legitimate gift. Like, when he'll pause, and whether he's green dogging or he's just going, his ability to diagnose protection schemes and either get in to the quarterback himself, or what I really love, Eric, his ability to act as that spiker and clear a lane or an alley for another linebacker or another defensive lineman. So he's either getting, as a blitzer, when he rushes, either by design or by read, he's either getting to the quarterback or he's sacrificing himself to clear up something for a team. Yeah, this is beautiful.
Look at him diagnose this short edge. He's hugging where that rush. Look right there, and then boom, he's there. See, I love that. I love that perspective for a linebacker, especially if we're talking Mike.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and we talk about this a lot when we're talking about defensive line play and we're talking about loopers and spikers and two-man games, like you want to come, if you're that looper, you want to come around tight and you want that efficient angle to the quarterback. And that's what Kirksey does from the second level here. And it's consistent. Like you saw it. He did it against Hurts in one of these clips. He did it against Mahomes. He's doing it here against Matt Ryan. So like a variety of offensive lines, a variety of schemes, a variety of quarterbacks. Like, oh, that one, like the way he just gets into his man and plays through that shoulder. And it allows him to end up getting the pressure, as you highlight him right there. But usually he'll do that so he can free up another one of his guys. So it's when he comes, it's either him getting to the quarterback or he's, kamikaze and things at the line of scrimmage and allowing somebody else to make a play. Oh, even that one, the brief hesitation, the straight line right onto Hurts. He recognizes the protection. He's coming, bears down on Hurts in a heartbeat. You see this with regularity. And that's another nice piece, Eric, as we've talked about some of the potential identity or philosophy tweaks. Here. Yeah, beautiful read on this one.
He sees this running back coming over here. So instead of coming inside, watch him loop. Yep. Just beautiful.
Shout out to Jerry Hughes there. Shout out to Jerry Hughes there on Malo. Yeah, that's part. So basically, like, again, we always talk about two-man games from the defensive line perspective. This almost acts like a two-man game with Jerry Hughes, number 55, and then Kirksey coming from the second level. Like, instead of taking on the back, he recognizes that Hughes is in that gap. So cool, let me put my foot into the ground and twist to the other side. And now you've got that pressure on Jalen Hurts. And we've talked about the potential scheme tweaks or philosophy changes that we'd like to see with the Bills defense. And speaking to some of that more aggressive nature under Sean McDermott, Kirksey is a move in that direction because of his blitzing ability, because of his ability to close down and attack quarterbacks and protection schemes.
All right, so we're getting called out. There's people are saying, "Oh, these are a lot of highlights," so they want to know what are some of the shortcomings.
We also mentioned some of the shortcomings already.
We did. But and you guys have to understand, we show what he can do because that's why teams sign these guys. All right. You got to keep that perspective in mind. They're not signing him for what he can't do. Coaches coach to minimize and mitigate those weaknesses. So you sign a player, you draft a player for what he can do. So yes, more times than not, we're showing what he can do. And that's what we're doing in this segment. But we did lead off with some negatives. But again, to rehash it, if you wanted some negatives, if you want some of that negativity, we talked about he gets covered up at times, especially on wide zone runs. Split flow, when they have a tight end that comes across the formation and they run that zone run in the opposite call, he gets caught up in that. And some of that was scheme, but some of that is his eyes, and his processing. That some of that's on him. What else did I have? He's going to miss some tackles. And you kind of talked about it a little bit, Ant, when it came to fitting up the running back. There are times where I think, again, we see a little drop off athletically where the running back's coming into the gap or he's coming up and you see Kirksey kind of fitting him up to tackle him. And that running back will accelerate or burst away or change direction. And the feet of Kirksey can't match it. So you'll see him, instead of moving his feet to square the guy up and stay in phase, and when you come to fit up the runner, his feet stop, his feet stall, and he lunges and he uses arm tackles. And so you saw some of those clips where he actually made the tackle and tripped the guy up in the backfield. But there are times where that running back will accelerate away, whether it's because of change of direction or he's got another gear as Kirksey's coming to fit him up.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. We also mentioned, some of his aggressiveness and how he like shoots the gaps, but he'll also like kind of take some shortcuts at times, and he'll try and shoot a gap kind of underneath, and it'll put him too shallow on the path to the running back, and it'll allow that running back to get more yardage or get past him. Despite the fact that he is athletic, and I like how he can function in match coverage, which is something I did not have confidence in Dotson or Klein. Mentally, I had faith, but physically, I didn't think he could do. I do think, again, because of that stop-start ability, like that he doesn't necessarily have. He isn't this change of direction, like great footwork, make you miss in a phone booth type of guy. Like he's more of a straight line speed, fluid athlete type of dude. So based on that, yeah, you're going to have to see how he plays. And Eric, I think that's also a good point too. Like you want to showcase what a player can do. And I think a terrific example of that is Jalen Hyatt, the receiver from Tennessee, who had a pretty good preseason so far with the Giants, although it's early on. Brian Daboll did so much in those games for Jalen Hyatt, putting him in motion or allowing him to be off the line of scrimmage, because so many of the things that Hyatt was being called out about on his tape was, well,
Yeah.
we're not seeing what his release package looks like and what's going to happen if he gets pressed. And so all these negatives and all these detractors. So Brian Dable took him and said, oh, I don't care about all that. Dude can fly. So I'm going to put him in certain alignments that he doesn't get pressed and he doesn't need a release package. And I'm going to
Right.
see if dudes can run with this receiver who can fly. And so Dable leaned into Hyatt's strengths. And again, that's just one example. You bring a guy in and you play to their strengths and you mitigate their weaknesses. The Bills did it in the 2020 season with AJ Klein. Why do you think AJ Klein was blitzing like every
Yeah,
other snap?
25%.
Exactly.
25% of the time.
Because they knew he couldn't cover anymore. So why would you sit here and be like, well, he can't cover. Let's break down why he can't cover. No, we're going to show you what he can do because that's what he's being brought in to do. But even within that, we did want to bring up those negatives and highlight the player as a whole.
Yeah, and to kind of wrap this segment up, and we're getting asked, like, do we think he can start? I think, especially if we're talking between the two guys they just signed, I think it'll take a couple weeks and Kirksey is going to be competing to start. I think he's that type of veteran. He's that type of heady player. He's played in several defenses. Some of it, again, it's just terminology. And, you know, it will take time when we talk about all the checks that this defense uses on game days. It'll take some time to get some of the nuance to it. But when it comes down to him starting, I would be shocked if he doesn't start in the next few weeks. I'd say he's going to start competing in 2 weeks. Who knows after that? It could be even sooner where he's elevated and he could be starting, especially if we're talking Dotson starting Bernard over Bernard or vice versa, because those guys didn't really separate each other at all. Yeah. Dotson looked rough. Bernard, we didn't even get to see play. Yeah. So really, you know, if Kirksey can get up to speed, he's going to compete sooner than later.
And this is that point is twofold because I'm in complete agreement with you on that. And I think one, it's a testament to Kirksey, but two, unfortunately, it's a testament to the lack of known quantity and or quality that they have at the linebacker position now. Like if it was between, I'm still, you know, holding out a little hope for Bernard. And that's the only thing that's playing in the back of my mind. But if it was between right now, like you just brought in Kirksey and the only options are Kirksey or Dotson, I think Kirksey's winning that job week one because Dotson's been a dumpster fire in coverage to a degree with certain pieces. And yeah, you know, I think he's a smart dude. He's been a captain. He's been around a lot of schemes. He's got a skill set that translates into this scheme based on what he just did in Houston. Dude is a leader. You mentioned, I love the communication piece. There's so many clips that we didn't show where he's adjusting the defense, both the line and the coverage units behind him. So yeah, I think week one is potentially realistic, but I think 2 to 4 is that sweet spot. And you could see him starting to make moves and starting to make plays.